that a group of us have been doing over the last 6 months. We meet every Friday morning, and the group also includes Martin Pfiffner, Angus Jenkinson, and Steve Brewis. Martin's online, Steve isn't with us, but Angela and Jose and I will be presenting what we're doing. What we decided to look at was the whole question of what Stafford called environment for decision making. And for those of you who remember the work in Chile, there was this quite extraordinary picture that looked like it was from Star Trek of this operations room with all these screens and VSMs and simulations and designs and all sorts of things. And this work has been progressing over the last, this is 50 years ago now, and all this work has been progressing. And we were interested in doing fundamentally two things. One was defining kind of like the master concept of what was involved in the operations room, creating an environment for decision. And of course, this is the fundamental of the viable system model. We've got all the information flowing up from 1 into 3, and then the interaction between 3 and 4 of decision making based on all the information coming from the environment, all the information coming up from inside, the very practical system 3 approach to it, the very wild blue sky thinking of system 4, and what's contained within system 5, policy constraints, and how artificial intelligence and model technology can complement and make a difference to the way decisions are made. And we're interested in this from a whole range of points of view, but basically it just makes the whole model, it brings the whole model to life, and how it makes decisions, how it adapts, how it changes in the context of a very unstable environment, kind of crisis that we're facing today. So that's the context. So we're going to start with slides. We were hoping everybody would be here for this, but through a variety of issues, it wasn't possible. So, Angela, do you want to do the first slide?
Yes. So
I can do the change from here.
Okay. As John was saying, we have this group that we meet once a week on the Fridays, and we've been meeting for the last few years. And every year we have a question, answer question. And the last year, this has been our research questions. Given Beer's original concept of an operation room as an environment for decision and control, and given the technological resources and experiences now available, what is the current potential and what are the requirements for its organization? So it's just thinking, when Stafford did it in the CyberSync project in the 1970s, it was a dream, but they didn't have the technology. Now we have the science, we have the technology, and we need it more than ever. So how can we in this community progress this idea of the operation room with artificial intelligence, and what else do we need to clarify about the VSM to make it work? Yeah. So that's the invitation. What we are going to do is to present you the progress we have done so far in the group. That is just for the time being, we're just thinking about designing the master concept of a new operation room, and then we will invite you to think with us about how can we progress to set it. Yeah? This is a research project, and the idea is that whoever wants to join this project in the future, that would be nice if people want to be with us. Max as well, he's working with Steve, and in a way, it's very much part of the group. Okay? Right, good.
Microphone. Yeah, I think the other thing to say before we start in earnest is a conversation I had with Stafford about exactly this, where probably in the late 1980s, I was saying to him, look at all the amazing technological advances, what a difference it would make. And he said to me, you need to understand the way we use cybernetics is that first of all, we get the science right. We understand, we do the diagnosis, we understand what's going on, we apply the cybernetic principles. And once we know what we need to do, then we look at the technology and we apply whatever's appropriate to make it work. And I think it's really important that you don't forget the science and the cybernetics and the basic principles and just say, oh, we've got all these fancy machines now, we can do this, and kind of minimize the importance of the science. So that's just what I thought was important. Okay, wrong way. Okay, this is the introduction. This is This is from Angus Jenkinson.
John, can I interrupt quickly, John?
Certainly.
Can you hear me? I think we don't see what you're presenting online. We still see the title, Welcome to Metaforum online.
Oh, okay.
Jorge has mentioned that in the chat, and it's true. It seems to be true. We can't really see what you're presenting, but
Yeah, I don't understand why, Martin, because it's on the screen here. It should be on the.
We have to share. Now we have to share.
Okay, that's not showing the screen. Yeah.
Is it better?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, we're in.
So
Okay.
that you know.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Excuse me, just to change my glasses. Okay, so this is Angus Jenkins. We've got 4 slides introducing it. Basically, what it's saying that we have lots and lots of software companies who are looking at management science, coming up with theories of how the world works in various sectors. And what is missing is an understanding that enables the kind of companies and institutions that managers and workers yearn for. And thus we need a systems framework. And of course, that's the VSM. And we've looked at the absence as key to the failure of the VSM to get the traction. And basically this is saying we need to look at some of the technological issues we've got at the moment in order to make the VSM more relevant. And people working as managers have helped companies run by inspiring leaders to think and act differently, but as a fully functioning VSM's tool set, readily adaptable to integration into a company, has not existed. This is block use of the VSM. And there we go. And acting like prototypes has been to the general design. So when we work with Steve Brewis, Steve has come up with a whole range of quite extraordinary software, which enables us to look at these questions in a new light. And these systems can scale and adjust and are all data driven, which is quite extraordinary. We'll get onto this later on. And so we have the framework that enables readjustment of recursive structure, for example, with new S1 units. And we see this as a major opportunity. So with the science that we've got at the moment, with the work that we've been doing, and with the software that Steve's been developing, we see this possibility for forward-thinking firms and individuals to actually start using the VSM and get all the advantages that we've been talking about for years on the basis of, first of all, the science and the knowledge that Stafford created in the 50s and 60s, and secondly, with the use of this new software. So that moves on to Martin. So you can do this.
No, Martin is with us.
Oh yeah, Martin, can you do this?
We need
Yes, I think I can.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, which is truly wonderful. Too loud, people are saying. That's okay.
You tell when we go to the next slide, okay, Martin?
Yeah,
Can you
I
hear
got
me?
the slides. Angela, I got the slides.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. So yes, this comes a little bit from the perspective of what I see in practice. And if I say practice, then I'm talking about business and non-business organizations, small one, mid-sized one, and large ones. Also big concerns in big blue chip companies. What we see that there is a need for a systemic steering organ. The status quo behind it for that need is what people are doing in management meetings, in top management committees and boards and so on. They typically just focus on the urgents, they focus on problems, and they focus on today's business. I'm reading now the orange titles here. So nobody really takes care about the important and about the chances, opportunities, and about the future of the business. Although they have maybe strategy departments or people working on strategies, it's not really the focus of management. And that's not theory. That's just evidence of what I'm observing. I'm since about 30 years doing these jobs in very different organizations, business, non-business. Is always the same pattern. So what we need, the white points under the orange title, is something that a structure that leads them to deal with capacity, capability, and actuality about not only operative perspectives, but also strategic perspectives and normative perspectives, and to integrate them. So in VSM language, an embodiment of the meta system of the system 3, 4, 5. Because without a structure like in an environment for decision, they're losing the focus on these things. The second point is a lack of a common view to align perspectives and minds, to develop shared models. They don't have shared models. I don't see that in practice. Everybody has their own language about, I'll give you an example. If you talk about strategy, what is a strategy? What are we talking about? And what is the difference between strategy and planning? What is our model of the environment? What is our model of ourselves? How do we work together? People don't have, everybody has models, of course, but they don't have shared models. So regarding the goods regulated theorem, that's really a big need also. They focus on the wrong recursion levels. Typically, they focus on what is happening in the black boxes of system one rather than on their own recursion level. So there's also a need, a structural need to guide their focus to the right recursion level. We see functional reductionism, which means that the finance people care about finance and nothing else, and the HR people care about people and nothing else, and the things just do not fit together. In the worst cases, and even in very large companies, I can see that pattern. In the worst example, they're deploying unaligned targets to their system ones, which change all the time and drives them crazy. So there's a need once more for seeing the whole, the interconnections and dependencies between the functions, and maintaining an overall view. And the last point here is the repetition of the same mistakes again and again. So there's not really a memory installed that is supporting management in taking decisions. If I say management, by the way, what I mean with it is what happens in systems 3, 4, 5 on every recursion level, independent of who is taking these decisions. Next slide, please, if there's no questions or comments. I don't see a next slide yet. I see Angela.
I'll just, something's gone wrong.
Porque yo tengo que...
Yes, that was the first one.
Okay.
Yep.
Exactly. Secondly, and it goes on with observations of practice, what we see in practice as typical patterns. There's a huge need for a strategic early warning system, a system for an environment for decision that allows management to see what is going on. What they typically do, once more, the orange titles, they think in 5-year plans on fixed targets. Still, that's the way how people think a strategy works. As long as it's more than 2 years, they call it a strategy. So they're based on fixed targets and to try to reach them, although the environment changes all the time. So for example, in the mobile industry, in the automotive industry, there was a huge uproar 2 years ago when people came back from the Chinese motor show, from the Shanghai Motor Show, excuse me, where they really saw that all the premises about what is happening in the markets, in the environment, with the competitors and so on was completely wrong. So adaptability based on environmental premises controlling seems to be something very important for really seeing when premises are changing, so that you need to rethink your strategy. And what we're talking about here is something like a real-time strategy idea. It's not that you come together every 3 years or 5 years and develop a strategy and then try to fulfill it, but strategy is an ongoing task in System 4, an ongoing screening of premises, and if they're changing, then you have to talk about your strategy and question it again. Second point, low variety planning, lack of options. There's no simulation of different options, although technology would allow things like that quite easily nowadays, but people just don't do it. We have an overkill of data. So the idea, and that was one of the main ideas, I think, of the operations room of Steffens in Chile, was that instead of people seeking for information in lots of papers or in lots of computers, you turn it around. The computer and the learning filters in the computer tell you when your attention is needed somewhere. This is not happening today. And the last point is how strategy is developed in general, which is very uncybernetic. The pattern, the orange pattern, is that the past determines the future. So people make prognosis about the future, and then they try to develop their plans for the future, instead of turning it around and saying, well, it's not the past that determines the future. It must be the future that determines the present. What do we need to do now to reach a specific target in the future, which is changing all the time? That's the point, right? That's where we need the cybernetics. Any questions or comments so far?
Martin,
If not, I just continue. Yes?
if I can. Very, very interesting. I was wondering if
you see these patterns. What are the implications? Are these companies going bankrupt because they are all, in a way, short-sighted in their strategy planning and so forth, or they are somehow exploiting the workers to be able to cope with these? What are the implications or consequences of this short-term, short-sighted thinking approach?
Yes, the consequences is that in areas where they have a lot of change, and I mean, if you look at our current world, there's also no area without a lot of change. They really get into problems because they see that the way they take decisions is much too slow compared, for example, to how others are doing. For example, in the Far East, organizations are much better used to take faster decisions and better decisions, because it's much less decentralized. It's much more decentralized, like we're learning it in the VSM, actually, right? So the problem is really too late. Decisions are taken too late, and very often the wrong decisions. That's the consequence. And yes, they feel it. They feel it. Especially, I can observe it in Europe at the moment.
So they're losing competitive advantage, and they are kind of slowly being squeezed in a way.
They're struggling, even if they have high market share. If they're strong, have a strong market position, they really start to struggle with organizations that keep up with all these turmoil, with all the fast changes, much faster than they do.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
It's true for small and large organizations, and for mid-sized organizations. Size is not a criterion. That's quite interesting also. I expected actually the large organizations, like the big concerns with 200,000 people and so on, they would be much better in that, but actually they're even worse.
Okay, thank you.
Next point is so was there something else?
Martin, yes, there is one question or two.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
There are two
Oh, sorry,
questions.
that'd be
Yeah.
Microphone?
So one first and then Jonathan. Yes, oh, yes.
We give him the microphone.
I don't have the microphone.
Who's got the microphone? Behind
Maybe
those.
go back with the slide then.
Just wait a minute, Martin. There are two questions more for you. Two questions more for you, okay?
Hi, Martin.
Hi.
You're talking about an early warning. What if the organization has received an early warning and ignores it? Can that early warning be automated?
I think well, we are experimenting with these things. I'm not talking about experience here, but I think it can. The question is, the early warning itself is not enough. The question is it picked up? You all know maybe the famous example of Kodak and how it went down the drain. Kodak was market leader in the chemical photography, and they had, even in the 70s, 80s, already had the early warnings about, well, digital is coming up and so on. They even brought up the first digital camera themselves. But nevertheless, people were just used to chemical photography. So they saw the old in the new, and they were not able to really make something of that information. And I think an environment for decision must be more than just a warning system. It includes a warning system, but it must lead to the right decisions in the end.
Okay, thank you.
Martin Espinosa, just a quick question. What you haven't mentioned in the status quo, I just wanted to ask is how much politics are you seeing? The VSM requires a fairly non-coercive environment to operate, and are you seeing that power politics going on in a lot of organizations?
Sorry, I had acoustical problems to understand what you're saying. Could you repeat it, please?
Okay. How much politics are you seeing going on, particularly coercive politics? Because the VSM requires non-coercion in its implementation. I've seen the VSM system destroyed by politics. How much of that are you seeing?
Yes, that's of course a problem too. You can see, especially in the larger organization, the more politics you see typically. But I don't think that this is the main problem. Of course, people have their personal interests and play the political games in the Machiavelli games in the large organizations, especially there. But I don't see that as the main threat for decision making in the organizations. I really see that lack of focus on the right things as the primary threat to decision making these days. And the wrong structure in general. I mean, that's where the VSM structure comes in. So an environment for decision like the one we're talking about, it must be embedded, of course, in a decision structure, in a recursive decision structure, like we can design it with a viable system model. And also there, typically, you also have, I mean, people are not used to that concept of recursivity. They have to learn it. That's also quite astonishing, by the way, I think. But that's what I see and what we see. But of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, the human dimension in decision making is very important. And it always has been a very important dimension in Stafford's concept also. So the psychology of how you digest information, the sociology of how you interact with others, and the synchronicity, the time aspects, that all must be part of a functioning environment for decision, I think. And that's what we've been discussing in this group also here. So to finish my part here, what we also see is there's this need for a human-machine interface and for augmented intelligence. We do not really foster collective intelligence. I mean, political games may be part of that. There's a transduction digestibility problem. People get too much information, they cannot digest it. They don't focus on Ashby, I think, would have named the essential variables. Decision based on outdated information, so synchronicity is a problem. We saw that during COVID, that decisions were taken by the government based on data that was outdated by 3 months at least, and led to wrong decisions in that area. And we have some unguided decision making also, so that derivation of measures and implementation planning and the controlling of continuous steering of things is also not really happening. So the bottom line is actually it's a catastrophe what we see. it's quite in a catastrophe. And I'm talking here about non-business, I'm talking about governments, I'm talking about organizations of communities, but also businesses, small and big, hospitals, schools, you name it. So to sum it up, what would be the benefit of an environment for decision in a modern way? The benefit would be better decisions through increased system intelligence, faster decisions and actions, shared understanding, and by that also greater implementation power, less surprise, one word that Steve Brewis likes to use quite a lot, more controllability in the sense of steering, more steerability, and more competitive advantage and more right decisions through real-time adaptability of an organization. That's why we think what we are dealing with, there's a huge and a real need in our organizations for better decision making. And I think we can, if we go back to Stafford's concept and combine that with modern technology, we could do a much better job here.
Well, thank
John
you.
and Angela.
Thank you very much. There were a few more questions in the room, so we're going to hold the questions till we finish the presentation, and then we'll be all for you. We'll be just engaging with others. So, John.
Okay, so that sets the context of what the problems are, what we need to do, what the kind of organisation we need to create. And we then went back to the Marble system model to try and isolate very clearly the master concept, which covers all the elements of how the Marble system model works, which contributes to creating an environment for decision making, which, as Martin said, is basically 3, 4, and 5, which is highly effective and answers all the issues that Martin was describing. So essentially, this is going to be based on the model which hopefully all of us know and understand. And what we hope is that the emerging design will be applicable at all levels, from the board of directors to a work group on the shop floor. Andrew will be going into this later, but if you remember the work Stafford did in Chile, it was this extraordinary operations room. And if you read a lot of his accounts, he says, this room is as relevant for a group of people on the shop floor, manufacturing in a factory somewhere, as it is for a board of directors and the ministers and of a country with huge decisions to make. This is a recursive model, so the environmental decision making is relevant at all different levels. So essentially, what we're looking at is trying to incorporate 3 quite different elements of decision making. First of all the stuff that System 4 is coming up with, where it's looking at the outside world, looking for threats and opportunities, and coming up with plans to say, okay, we've got a possibility here, we've got a threat here, we need to do the following in order to take advantage of that. And all that blue sky thinking, the planners, the imagination, the creativity, which is fundamental to System 4. And using that in the context of System 3, who's saying, oh yes, well that's all very well, but I've got these production lines to run, and I've got bills to pay, and I've got all the practicalities of day-to-day operation. So you've got these two elements. And again, this goes back to Jan's presentation this morning. This is another yin-yang. These 2 complementary opposites which need to work together so that the plans evolve in the context of both the blue sky thinking and the very down-to-earth practicalities. And really, that's how good decisions need to be made. And of course, all of that 3-4 interaction, the big homeostat, which the 2 biggest arrows on the model, all that needs to be in the context of the System 5 policies, identity, all those constraints which are fundamental to the identity of the system. This is the kind of organisation we are. This is how we operate. These are our fundamental values. So each of these has to have an element in this master concept. And what we did then was go through the model and in great detail go through all the requirements that systems 3, 4, and 5 need to do. A little bit about System 1, because one of the things the System 3 needs is a very thorough real-time model of the operation. And if system 3 isn't producing the data to do that, then system 3 won't have its model, the 3-4 heliostat won't work, and the environment decision becomes ineffective. So I'm not going to go through this in great detail because hopefully most of you know all these, but for example, we take system 4, needs to monitor thoroughly the environment, model it, assess the relevance, ensure all the information is presented in accessible form. Jose is going to talk about communication and the way that you don't just generate information, it has to be in a form that people can actually understand and use it. Generate the plans to adapt, assess the plans, look at simulations, look at various scenarios, and again, do all that in the context of system 5. So the model is very clear. You can go through all these elements of what Stafford said in quite fundamental VSM theory and come up with this kind of list. And this is Angela's slide.
Well, basically, what Jonah already was saying that I think that one of the main misunderstandings in the literature about the operations room and the CyberSync project has been people thinking that what Stafford was trying to do in Chile was a technological dream in which all the factories in Chile will be controlled from the president's office. And the president's office will have all the information and KPIs to technocratically govern the country. And this is, for instance, the concept of Eden Medina and many people that have done commentaries on the CyberSync project. And I think that they missed the real thing, that it was what Stafford was trying to do was to create a model of distributed governance in which he would be empowering the workers. He was educating the workers from the shop floor in VSM concepts with the idea that they will be able to self-regulate their own factories. They will be able to design the KPIs. And the problem was that the technology that they had was not distributed in those days. They had a technology that was in Chile, in the Palacio de la Moneda, in the cabinet office, and they were picking up performance indicators and sending them sometimes in horses or in boats through the rivers or whatever. So not exactly in real time, but that was the best that they could do at that time to send information to the president's office where it was processed, and then the algedonics and everything were devolved to the factories. So in that respect, it was a centralized technocratic information system. But the intention always was to create this capability of self-regulation at each level of the question. Yeah? So if we understand that properly, now that we have the technology, then this concept of recursive distributed governance is what we can do. Now with our mobile phones, we can have an application in the mobile phone with the KPIs. We can have we can be monitoring in real time the KPIs, and we can have through WhatsApp an emergency WhatsApp system in which we can say, hey, no, this plant in Acapulco, whatever, is behaving in weird terms. We need to get into the operation room that can be virtual, and we can do something about it. This is all the information about, let's deal with this emergency. Yeah. So this idea is that if each one of the systems at each level of recursion have their own operation room, yeah, they will be self-regulated. What we Steve talk about surprise, Steve Ruiz, coping with surprise, monitor in real time their own survival variables that are going to be different in each level of recursion, and acting upon them in an agile manner. We all know, Stafford was talking about agile systems 50 years ago. Nowadays, everybody is very aware of the importance of agile systems, and we have the technology. So this is the idea, and then recursive decision-making spaces allow collective consciousness to emerge. So the idea of consciousness is how can we share certain facts, certain understandings in real time that create a collective mental model, and this is the way in which we can progress towards making collective decisions. And in this moment, this is doable. Yeah? Now, what we try to do in the group is to think about the operation room. No, as we said before, we need to have a model of itself. I mean, the VSM provides a really robust and really nice way of modeling, mapping the whole organization systemically. We can design a cyber filter to manage the signals between system 1 and system 3. We can use the triple index, and we can use that idea of alerting signals. We can design the operation room. The operation room, not only we have all the technology, but now we have artificial intelligence, and that's the research question we have. Now, with all the technology and artificial intelligence, what else can we do, or how can we use to our best artificial intelligence to do some of the things that we were expecting to see in an operation room? Yeah. And in terms of system 4 has to have this model of the organization versus niche. As we know, this is the most complex variety attenuator of all, because I mean, all the variety that is external in the environment is enormous. And it's always one of the biggest challenges for an organization to try to make sense of what's going on outside, and to make sense in advance, to be aware that, well, something needs to be done because there has been a dramatic change that is going to change even our own identity, or definitely our own strategy. As Martin was saying, we need to think about adaptive strategies. So how can we create a really strong model of the organization? Now, this all needs new technologies. Jose is going to talk a little bit about that. VSM, cyber filter, the operation room are some of the, let's say, the basic concepts. But now we have these extra technologies and other systemic and complex systems methodologies that will be really highly complementary. And then we are beginning to think, how can we put these things together to design these really wiser environments for decision making? Okay, Jose?
Sure, okay. Tools. That's top.
Very much. Well, now it's my turn. Normally, when I start my courses in the university with my students, normally I tell them, when I finish, you will become absolutely depressed. I know that it's not very optimistic way of starting a lecture or a class. But after listening Martin talking about the catastrophic situation that he witnessed after 30 years of experience, I think that we have a kind of flavor of the situation. Martin explained the structural complexity that is facilitated the understanding of it with the biosystem model. We can see the system 5, system 4, system 3, 2, etc., and we can identify all the flows that may appear. This is a structural complexity, but we have another complexity, that is the complexity of the decision taking. When a human being takes a decision, this decision will have, with that delay, we have effects, and these effects are going to be happening in different feedback loops, and these feedback loops are interconnected. So when one decision taker decides something, this will activate a feedback loop that will activate another feedback loop, and another, and another, and another, and another. So the final result of the decision that the decision taker at the starting is very difficult to know. So we have a problem here, and the problem is that if we cannot associate the result to the action, how can we learn? We cannot learn. And this is why some funny artists in Spain made a drawing where we could see a person that was telling. Experience is changing errors. So, well, we know very optimistic. Yeah, if we cannot learn, we will try another thing, another. So this is the second problem, dynamic complexity. And then we have another problem. If we have not enough with the structural complexity and with the dynamic complexity, we have still another problem, that is the communications complexity. Jan de Bisch talked this morning about the ways of communicating and creating a kind of collective understanding related to whatever issues. This is the focus of my part related to the environment for decision. here the focus is on how can the managers or advisors help to take decisions and to solve some of these structural or dynamic problems of the complexity derived from the structure of the dynamic effects. Here what we can say is that we have the technology and we have experts that know what is going on, as we have seen in the presentation of Mark, etc. What is the challenge that we have? Enhance decision makers' capacity. How can we improve the capacity of the persons to take decisions, to study whatever complex problem they are facing? What is the core problem identified? The ineffective communication. The difficulty that we find is that the persons have serious difficulties to communicate. We can see why that may happen. We have in this image, on the right, we have two persons that are trying to communicate. The person on the left tries to say something to the person on the right. What I'm telling you is whatever, but this message goes through first a transducer that converts the message into a medium that can be transmitted through a communication channel. A communication channel may be a conversation, maybe a WhatsApp, maybe an email, etc., etc. And the communication channel has to have the capacity to convey the amount of information that the sender intends to send. Then, when the information comes, the message comes out of the channel, again, it is decodified so the receiver may understand. But when it reaches the receiver, if we are lucky and the message reaches the receiver without distortion, we have still another problems to, or filters to cross, that are the mental models and the cognitive filters. The receiver interprets the information that reaches him with the mental models he has, the way he perceives the world, and this is something that is personal. It's the result of all the life of that person, all the cultural aspect, ideological aspect, religious aspect, etc., and with that mental model, with that way of seeing the reality, receives the information that the sender sends. If we are lucky and reach the consciousness of the receiver, say, well, we have at least half of the task, but the message does not stop here. If we want to have an adequate communication, the receiver has to send back the reply telling, this is what I understood. And then this message, now here comes the sender. Again, we have the transducer, the communication channel, the decodifier, and reaches the initial sender, and again has to be transformed, crossing all the filters, all the cognitive limitations, etc., etc. Well, we can see that if we succeed in saving all these obstacles, when that happens, I use a word that is very well known, that is miracle. I succeed. What the receiver understood is what I pretended to say. Well, in the families it's quite common. You don't listen to me, this is what I wanted to say, but what this kind of situations are quite familiar. But in the organization, it's very severe. If we are lucky, we have different possibilities for interaction. We may have the possibility, no, I think I understand you well, and I send again a message, and we repeat this process, and we may be lacking at the end, at certain point, we may reach that agreement, and that understanding, that now you understood what I intended that you understand. So this is the aspect that affects the human being taking the decisions in organizations. Assuming that the other two aspects were already solved, the structural aspects, etc. Well, the other aspects to take into account, I say that successful knowledge sharing rare, I call it exaggerating, maybe a little bit miracle, but we have additional problems that the different perceptions are together with different interests. One thing are the interests of the financial people, or are the interest of the human resources, or the production, or the market, etc., etc. Each one has their own interests, and they will try to take the conversation towards the area that they are interested in. What is the need if that is what happens? Different perceptions and different interests. What we would need at least would be a common language. So at least we can understand what are we saying. Because if we don't have a common language, the financial people talks about profit, leverage, short shares, etc., or how we should go in the boost. The human will talk about motivation, etc., etc. They are using languages that are not fully shared. What we need is a language that all of them share. And what is that language? What kind of language may we find that is understood by everybody? This is our goal. We will make a comment just in a moment. And the other aspect to have in mind is that to have success in the communication, the minds have to be synchronized. I mentioned here resonance is the key. When one person talks to another, that person has to have, if we are talking, for example, to music, you play a sound with a chord in the guitar. The other person has to have the chord in the brain, so that that chord enters into resonance and is heard. We can use this metaphor for the human mind. We have to be able to get in resonance to the message and the frequency of the person that is sending me a piece of information. And the other aspect is that the models have to be shared. The mental models have to be shared. If I have a mental model about how the reality is, what I'm perceiving about the problematic situation that we are studying, this mental model that I have about the situation has to be shared by the other person to whom I wish to communicate. So this is another, these are just challenges. Examples of if we have the difficulty, we need a common language. What can we have to help us on that? Do we have some hope? So we can hope that some communication is possible. What is about what exists outside there that we can use? Well, there are many tools. Some of them have quite a long experience already. For example, the causal loop diagrams have been used in system dynamics and many other disciplines since dozens of years. On the right, we have an example of a causal loop diagram that I prepared for some authority in Spain. We have in Spain a big problem in many of the countries, that is the difficulty to get flats. The young people cannot rent a flat because it's too expensive. So the proposal, some of the alternatives that's in some cases proposes to lower the price just by law. You have to reduce the price 50%, 7%, 10%, whatever, or do it in sectors as well. This is a very complex problem. It's an example of a dynamically complex problem. How do you talk about that? You have people that belong to the bank, people that belong to the construction industry, people that belong to the town hall, etc., etc. You have people from different areas. How do they communicate and get an idea of the situation, the problem, and the elements that exist, and where could they intervene to get the final result that is supposed to guarantee that every person may have access to a flat with the problem. So if this is the final goal, how could we find actions that reach that take us there? Well, examples of communication that I have witnessed probably all of you is fragmentary. Somebody talks about the building industry, or the big investors, or the companies that build the buildings, the politicians that are trying to guarantee an acceptance of their policies, etc. So we have such a variety of different interests that even talking is quite complicated. And what normally happens is that the variety of the communication is chopped off. And it's just elemental messages, very short and very powerful theory, but they will have a dynamic effect that only will be seen if you have a tool that helps you to see what are going to be the implications of a decision that you make in a certain point. What are the multiple effects that are interrelated and that are delayed in the time, so they don't manifest instantly. They will manifest, some of them in weeks, some of them in months, some of them in years, etc. How can you communicate? Well, the proposal is if you, the people that is involved in deciding a policy for that, for facing that problem, is instead of fighting among you about the different proposals, I propose that, I propose this, the other propose the other, etc. Instead of fighting among you, why don't you fight with the problem, with the world, and not all of us together fight with the problem in the world. So I wanna touch this. I wanna touch this. Okay, touch it. Let's see the effects. I wanna touch this, etc. So we have a tool that helps us to communicate, and that saves many conflicts. As we saw in the previous page, that trying to communicate one person with another is quite difficult. And we have many persons. The scale of the complexity we can imagine is terrific. Well, here we may have a help. This doesn't mean that solves the problem, but it's an example. The other tool that is used in this case in system dynamics, that I think that may be useful in certain occasions, is the use of the second step of the modeling of a system dynamics application. That is the identification of the stocks and flows. This helps tremendously. If we differentiate variables that stocks, accumulate something, and variables that modify the stocks, it's very simple, but the people normally mix stocks, flows, decisions, parameters, and that may clarify and help communication. Again, these are ways of helping the human being to communicate. And another example is the multi-level VSM representations. This was mentioned by John, Martin, Angela. That is, if we clarify the recursion levels of our aspect of issue or organization, even the mere identification of the recursion levels helps the communication, because help us to position ourselves in a certain level and not mix problems that are belonging to a recursion level that is 2 or 3 levels above or 2 or 3 levels below, etc. That creates confusion. This is another tool, and the VSM in that sense, I think, is a fantastic help to the human being to communicate. The graphical representation of the VSM is one of the things that are being considered in the improvement of the tools that exist, that to help people to see, for example, in the walls, images of different recursion levels, the way of system model of different recursion levels, etc., etc. So the communication helped with these additional elements may reduce the pessimistic view that I was mentioning at the beginning. So that is all. By the way, when I ended the course, I tried to tell the students, well, you can see that there's hope. So we were a little pessimistic at the starting, but the thing is bad, but has a solution. So what is, just to end my commentary, the role of the devices and the managers act as facilitators of the common language. They should help to create this common language that the people implicated will use. In system dynamics, it's very common to put
You got one more, one more slide.
Is it?
No, it's good. Great.
Okay, well, thank you, Jose. Now, I just want to let you know, Steve Ruiz couldn't be with us. He's going through a difficult family health issue. And we are very much missing him because, I mean, the work that he has been doing is unbelievable. Thank you, Marta. Just letting you know that Steve Brewis is not with us because of a family health issue. And we are going to miss him because he has been our inspiration for this Department research project. He did a massive application in British Telecom of the VSM for several years. And recently he has been applying, he's a very talented systems programmer. And now he's applying all the software that he developed a full cybersecurity software. And now he's applying it in a big company in North America. And he's been showing us the work that he's doing, and he's using artificial intelligence. So all these dreams that we have, in a way, he has made it true. And he's practicing it in this company with the super data team. So he's not with us, but he has prepared the slides, and John is going to present the slides. And after that, we are going to start the watch. Yeah. So just start thinking questions and ideas, and after we finish with this bit of the presentation, we will have a conversation together. Okay.
Okay. I begin with great trepidation because Steve has done some extraordinary work, and we're all in awe of what he's done. And I'm going to try and represent it here and give a decent account of what he's doing. He wanted to start off the presentation with pictures like this because he said when he was a young man, he was always interested in how things worked and how the fundamental structures underneath them. So with the train and with the motorbike and with boats, and he was always looking for how does it work? How do I fix it? If it breaks, how do I get it back together? And that's his fundamental view of reality. And then he got a job at BT, and he was put in charge of all the payphones, tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of payphones, which were all over the UK. And it was his job to try and keep the thing running, and if it broke, to fix it. And he said that he tried to model it, and he just got this complete mess. It was almost impossible to model the thing. So what he did was, at that time, he met Stafford. They worked together very closely on this. And he started using the VSM, and he also pioneered a different way of thinking about recursions using this snowflake model. And this is something that Andrew and I adopted when we do some work at a hospital, because if you do recursions the normal way, you start off with one system of focus, and then move down the page and you put another 3 or 4 or however many, and then you move down and down and down. If you've got a few levels of recursion, by the time you get down to the bottom of the page, you've got hundreds, and you've still got the same width of paper. So if you start with a VSM in the middle, so this is system 0, and then you move out from that, and you say, here's the first level of recursion down, and you move out radially. Every time you move to a lower level of recursion, you've got a bigger circle. So you can get hundreds and hundreds of VSMs, little VSMs on your recursive diagram. So we kind of come to the same conclusion on that. But what's really fascinating us is Steve's ability to use real-time data to drive the sort of models that we draw in our books and on our computers. And Steve's are real-time data-driven models. So this is an actual screenshot of one of the companies he's working with. He starts with the whole company here in the middle, and then the red lines here define the next level of recursion down. So you've got the whole organization with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 system ones, and then as you move out another recursion, this recursion one down at the next level of recursion has 3 system ones, and so on and so forth. And all of this is data driven. Okay, he has real information flowing in from the company in various ways, and it powers these models. So what he can do is, he can take any node on this diagram, and each node is a viable system in its own right. And he clicks a button, and it draws a VSM for it. Okay, so he's got a real time. You could get the whole picture of the company with all the levels of recursion at various radial levels coming out from the center. You click on any one viable system, and you can get a diagram like this. You can then go into that one and say, okay, we're here. We're going to go down into this system 1, which is itself a viable system, an even lower level of recursion, and get another VSM, and so on and so forth. So we've got this extraordinary piece of software, which is real time and has got a complete picture of the organization. And this is quite extraordinary to watch, because we were hoping he could do this in real time for this meeting, but sadly his family issues have overtaken him. So, so and another one, this one here is a viable system with an awful lot of systems run. So these are all just coming out of his software in real time. Now, you say, okay, well, what can he do with these? And what he can do is, he can go from the model, and he can, for every different viable system in this very large company he's working with in the States, he looks at resources, revenue, remuneration, wage to revenue percentages, and he does profit and loss accounts on every viable system in the entire organization, and he can do that every hour. So he can get P&Ls every hour, so he gets all the financial information out in real time. And then he uses that to draw further models And these clusters here, each of these is a different sub-organisation has a particular level of recursion. And he does various stuff with that, which he's gone into in great depth. But probably, as we're tracking on with time, we're not going to go into in great depth. And it's just this experience of seeing a real-time model driven by the data on the screen, showing exactly what's happening in all parts of the organisation. Marius,
I'm quite interested in and
do you want a microphone?
I don't know
You got it.
yeah. My interest is in, has he done anything around the conversations going on in these recurring levels to actually start doing collective intelligence on conversations that you captured on a data level? You know, obviously it has mostly textual, and then do they have plans also looking at body movements through space in time through the buildings or the plants, whatever, to try to understand relationships between those sorts of patterns
Yeah, I really
And-
don't know.
and
we
what
never asked this
actually
question.
emerges into this data.
Do you know Angela or Jose?
The way that he normally says that he's very aware of the importance of conversations, and he's very aware of that this is the way of creating a space for intelligent, effective conversations. But to be honest, I think that he's very driven by the technology, and his focus has been always in creating a space in which the technology can provide as much useful information as possible. So I think that your question is very, very.
Yeah, we'll ask him.
And I think that this is part of the thing that would be interesting to discuss now with them. Yeah?
Yes.
Because it was very funny. We, as part of this group, Christian, I don't know if Christian is around, but Christian made a question to ChatGPT saying, what Stafford Beer will say about each one of the 6 members of this group. And it was fascinating, the answer, because the answer that ChatGPT said Stafford would say about Steve Brewis was amazing, the work that he has done. Very proud that you have managed to create a proper cyber filter in a very important corporation in BT, fully implemented. So you are my hero, you've done it, you've demonstrated, but be aware of not overestimating the power of technology. Yeah, be aware that the human aspect, the conversational aspect are also very important, and that fits again with what Jan was talking this moment. That is not just the technology, it's just so, and what Jose was saying about the communication of complexity. It's not just that we have a pure information system that is super intelligent, now more intelligent than ever, and it's going to give us all the answers. No. How are we going to understand the answers? How are we going to do the right questions? How are we going to interact between us to be able to make the right decisions? Yeah. So
Yeah, one of the things that Steve.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? There's an alarm going off over here, and it means we cannot hear you.
I think it's Angela's phone. Isn't it?
yeah, that's it. I have a little to say. There's always someone trying to say something.
Next time. Yeah, we all got that. Okay. Yeah. One of the conversations that I've had with Steve is because for me the autonomy of the individual in the workgroup are fundamental. I mean, this is what the model is basically all about, and how you begin with that autonomy at the lowest you can, give people as much space and freedom and creativity to innovate as you possibly can, and then build up from there. And how his model refers to that. And one of the things he does is to generate the information that the individual needs in order to do his job more effectively in the context of the viable system in which he works, and say to the workgroup. So rather than using this in an authoritarian way, he's sending the information down where it's needed, so that workgroups and individuals can have more autonomy to develop. So I don't know if that reflects on the question, but
I think maybe 1/2 of it, yeah.
well, that's more than I expected. Okay, we have loads of questions. I don't know who's next.
But John, why don't we start the watch? Or shall we just address all the questions and then we will?
Careful. I was Andrew's going to disappear through the floor in a minute. Yeah, I think we've only got 3/4 of an hour left, and we really want to break into groups so that we can just.
Okay, let's do the questions and then start the workshop.
Yeah, and we can answer the questions as we go around. We'll go group to group.
No, but I mean, if there is only two, let's ask.
No, there's about 10 questions. Who wants to ask the question? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, let's do the questions in the small groups and then each group will bring questions and answers.
This slide does answer Margaret's question about the conversation.
You can talk about that, please.
Oh yeah, Max, I should have asked you. Max works with Steve, so
Yeah.
come up here, Max.
Yeah, because we are not expert in AI and Max is working with Steve.
As a part of this model, one of the main things is how do you communicate with it? Because it's all well and good. Back to the previous visualization of, well, how do you make that and how do you communicate with it? Because most people who are practitioners aren't really going to want to deal with that visualization and do anything with it other than it's just a visualization. So when you're having a conversation about the profit and loss forecast over the next year for your business, instead of typing in all the numbers and some things that you predicted, that this here, the conversational AI stack, I've not seen this slide before, but I recognise it from the work we've done. Things like Whisper, there's various other speech to text interfaces that you can use, but integrates the conversation that you're having in that boardroom speech to texts, and then feeds it as context into a model that has the VSM model of the business in context as well. So this custom version of an AI chat interface understands your business, understands what you're talking about around it, and then provides intelligence in real time. You've just brought up what's the profit and loss going to be over your company over the next 3 months. Immediately goes into the database related to your financial records in real time, pulls it up. So instead of you going to have to go off, find the slide that says, here's what the profit and loss is going to be, it in real time is listening to that conversation and providing answers to any question that you might have about the business as you're discussing it. And then this is kind of the technical explanation of how that process works.
Yeah, I'm curious, do you feed like contextual data into the system, stuff like meeting minutes from conversations or meetings that you have, for example, on Zoom?
Yeah, that's kind of the way that we sort of started going with it. At the minute, it's still just this meeting right now and the context of the business. Going back a few slides and they're talking about organizational memory. There's not a particularly well-developed database of everything that's being spoken about in the business. So that's something that we're planning on integrating into it. So then the model that we've got, while it also has all the data related to your business that's traditionally quantitative, so KPIs, KPIs, all your financial metrics, but also what used to be kind of the qualitative part of the business. So all the conversations that everybody's having, all of the documents that, once upon a time a PDF was just a load of text, but with a language model, it's now a quantitative document as well that you can then analyze and apply to the traditionally quantitative metrics of that business as well.
Is that not just, looking at that slide and what you described, that's just an AI model that's applied to a business system. But how does it differentiate between different system components, and how does it handle recursion? Because the thing I can't see anywhere of this, I'm looking to answer it. How does, so technically, if I want to build a system like that, what stuff appears VSM doesn't have? It's System 5 doesn't have any kind of a hook.
to hook up into the next system. So it's going to go drop down, right? And it's going to have like, it's going to be the top of the bottom of that system, which is in system 1. And all these charts where they all point across into the environment, all of the environments all overlap. So it's not like that just goes into a pool. He says there's a structure there, so don't think of it, it's where they all overlap, right? So how do you handle that?
So kind of work in progress, but the idea of the visualization, going back a slide, is that can also correspond to a natural language explanation of the business, as you would do when you're doing a VSM.
Okay, so that's it going out there.
Yeah, so then the model that you're using then has that in context, and it can combine the data with the fact that the AI model understands your VSM model of the business and provides relevant information or intelligence to you, given what you're talking about. And then it kind of links in with the idea of that collective language of how you're all talking about the business. It's kind of, you would call it a collective white space.
So does it have? Can you imagine that you would have one of these systems for VSM? So now you've got, imagine like you're going to have a hierarchy of recursive leads, recursive AI systems that are all going to be talking to one another, or is it one governator AI system that's looking over the entire ecosystem of VSM?
At the minute, it'd be one that's looking over the entire. So you've got your board, you have the conversation about strategy, and then it takes the entire context.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question because I know that there's a lot of energy and questions. We don't want to block the energy and the questions. We have only 35 minutes, so if you are happy, we can just engage in the conversations and allow everybody to do the questions and be all together. Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah,
So we can continue with the questions. So who were the ones that were waiting? Okay.
I think Jose wants to make a final comment before.
Just some information that complements the Max.
Max, yes, don't go away. Don't go away.
By the way, congratulations to Max and to Steve for the wonder that they have created. This is quite. My own observation is just, I was talking before about the elements that may help the human beings to communicate. And I mentioned 2 of them, causal loop diagrams and the system dynamic models, stocks and flows. Here, the causal loop diagram is one of the elements that is embedded in the software that I have created. You build the causal loop diagrams of whatever level of proportion they are considering, and is represented and is debatable by the people that is affected by that by those values. And also, beside the causal loop diagram, the system dynamics model is also better. They don't use system dynamic model; they program it by themselves and do it so they don't depend on any commercial software. They just do it. But that's the same thing. That is, when they are taking decisions, they evaluate the impact, the dynamic effects that I mentioned before of each decision under different scenarios is evaluated inside the model to see the effects that would have different time delays. And it's also embedded in the software. So it's really, I would say, wonder. Let's summarize it.
Okay. Thank you, Jose. I think that we have people waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I listened quite attentive, and if I summarize the line of thoughts until now, it comes to first, we must make use of all information available, make that available for the persons who need to decide. There is an assumption that we can communicate, we can share a similar understanding of the information, and there is an assumption that we can agree on the tools, that the tools are useful and meaningful. Now, I must make a confession. In 2016, I have a small software company. I developed a similar system, and I'm currently in the phase of abandoning it. I'm abandoning it because those three assumptions are not correct. You have developmental differences in groups, and so aiming for a shared mental model is a fiction. What you should do is work with the differences, and I haven't found a model or a framework that allows working with the differences, because a framework assumes that we agree with the framework, which is not correct. The assumption is not correct. The communication problem is usually not a communication problem. It's because people have different ways of being and sensing, make interpretations, they have different perspectives. And what I'm wondering with this system, and the question is related to the question you asked, how does collaborative intelligence occur in the system that is presented here? Because I do not see it. I do not see it if you agree that the three assumptions are not correct. And there can never be one overarching model, as you presented it, that can govern all the system information. Because what I experienced in dealing with artificial intelligence, that is that it demands from the human the capability to assess whether the outcomes of the artificial intelligence system is correct or not. Artificial intelligence is just an association system, but it is trained in appearing right. It's not trained in correctness. And so what in the system ensures that the output that it delivers is corrected by humans and by human interpretation and decision making. But that's what I'm struggling with.
I like very much your content. I think that you just spotted something that is very core to the questions that we have. I don't think that any of us have a clear answer yet, but I do agree that you have the alternative.
One fundamental thing I agree with what sorry, I didn't mean that.
Okay.
One is just shared values and beliefs. Humans cooperate when they create. So humans, if you look at a very simple mechanism of going back to Aristotle, means an end. A means is held together by belief that it will result in the ends. But the trouble is, an end is just a means to another end. Oh, sorry. And so it goes on until you get to the end where you're holding people. It's when people's beliefs fundamentally different that you get a serious problem. If you can align people's beliefs and shared values, then you have a system where people collaborate. If they just agree on the means but not the ends, they will cooperate. But if they agree on the ends but not the means, they'll go into competition. But any system, a really good system, this is what John and I were talking about in cooperatives. And there's a wonderful feeling when you work in a system where you have shared values and beliefs. And that has to be generated through the human interaction. And the problem I have with what you're doing, I mean, firstly, what you're doing is fantastic, because I've been coming here for several times, I'm saying, how are we going to develop the VSM? Because it needs to come forward. But what you haven't done is identify the problems with the VSM before you go on to improve it. And then I was looking for a slide that says, these are the problems. And I've got 5 problems. Homeostat. Homeostats don't work. We've seen just the overall part of the homeostat with amplification reduction, but underneath it's changing the states. And if you put a model 10 homostats with 10 different states, they go into a mode that's called hunting. It's on page 249 of the Brain of the Firm. And he goes in to say, this is a serious problem. He doesn't actually say it, but it's a serious problem because the homostat will just go looking for a solution once it's been tipped out of the equilibrium state, and it won't find another state because it's got 1,000 options to go through. And Stafford overcame that by saying you use an alginode, algebra. Algebra node. Okay, I've never heard anyone talk about a VSM and an algebra node. Where's the algebra node in the VSM? Okay, so that is what's driving the changing in the states. What Rios just talked about is fantastic, and it basically turns Stafford's Shannon and Weaver concept of information theory, which transmits information but not meaning. Okay, and Lerman transmits meaning but not information. And what you're actually doing is what you've actually created a past conversation, which past conversation theory comes from past. But let's have a conversation through your system between me and my wife. Now I'm a man, I do 3 colours, red, blue and green. Midnight peacock is not a colour to me. Okay. So, and actually colour is a useful one because some countries have different coloured names and colours that they identify that aren't available in others. So my wife says to me, she transmits to me through your system that it's red. Okay, but red's a different colour to me. But I say, yes, it's red. I've just gone back and given her feedback, it's the same colour, but it's the wrong, it's created resonance in me. I love red, but my red is her blue. So creating an overarching, so Lerman put it right when he sorry, Mantra and Varela talked about languaging, not language. And it's the process of that communication that's important in a past conversation. But also, what the previous speaker was saying, the differences, so past conversations are really useful when you get a difference. I say red, and my wife says blue, and she thinks, oh, actually blue would be good. So the mistakes in the past conversation are immensely creative. And they actually, I have conversations with my past conversation, my notebooks. I write something down in bad writing, and I misinterpret it when I come back and, oh, that's a really good idea. Oh, I didn't mean that. So there's no one common language that you can really be able to create. And I've got 2 other problems that I'll name, but I won't go into. Self-awareness in the VSM, the audit channel. It's not an audit channel, it's a re-entry into the system, and it's coming from the wrong place. The algedonic signal doesn't come from the audit channel, it comes from systems 3 coming up. Innovation, the diagram in the VSM on, you showed part of the diagram of system 4, but have you seen the diagram Stafford drew for innovation, which is endless feedback loops? You try and program that, it doesn't work. So how does innovation happen in the VSM? And we're just smoothing over some of these things, but when you're trying to program them, they become immensely difficult.
We have one question from Martin. You need to unmute Martin.
Thank you. Maybe first of all, it would be nice for the online audience if you could say who is talking, because we can't see that. So before somebody starts to talk. I just wanted to react on what has been said, and I like both statements very much, the last ones. I think the current problem that we're facing is not even that they cannot agree on colors. I think the problem is that they even don't talk about colors. They talk about numbers. What I want to say with that is they as I started with the statement about the need for such a thing as an environment for decision, that talk about things that are less important but urgent maybe, and things like that. So to build a structure that leads a focus at least on the right areas which should be discussed, that's the first step, and that's a huge step for a lot of organizations already. And the other thing is then that what I see is that people really want to come up with common models. And although it's right, they never come up in the end with shared models in the total. I think it's not needed. I think what is needed is to just agree on some essential variables and about their interaction. Because I think, to me, that's the main core of systemic thinking anyway, to reduce the whole variety to essential variables but talk about them with the full interactions of them, creating complexity. In practice, they base decisions, and if I say they, I mean any kind of organ taking decisions for any kind of organization, be it a hospital or a community or a company. They base their decisions on very low variety models. And for example, if they talk about the model of itself, how does our own organization look like? They're still looking at organization charts, very low model. And if we can enhance that, that would be a huge step already, even if we must accept that we never will come up with common language to 100% and shared models to 100%. But I think we can do huge steps, dealing also with that ambiguity and uncertainty, if we allow people to work in an environment that supports them in doing that, because they're not used to do it, they don't do it automatically.
Okay, thank you, Martin. We have Al-Fadal.
Yes, Angela, thank you very much. Just I'd like to add to the design and let's say of the environment operation rule for decision makers. I think we need to consider also Stafford Beer performance model, which is about productivity, potentiality, and latency, and the performance for the whole organization. I used it to design a system for well-performing companies in my country. So I got what's called good insights from VSM and also from this performance model to design the system. And today the system could be used also for at economy level, but also it could be used for different recursive level geographically in 11 zones in Oman or in 10 industries in Oman. Depends, you wanted to see from geographical point of view or industry point of view. And also within industry, it could be seen at upstream or downstream of the same industry. So just my point, to consider the performance model of Stafford Beer, because it's quite more advanced than what have been seen today in the market, like balance scorecard, for example.
Thank you, Brother. We have here another question.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was fascinating. I had two questions for the panel. One was, it was really interesting to see that software there. Do you think that enterprise resource planning software is what Stafford Beer had in mind for Project Cybersyn? So something that relates, as was mentioned at the start of the talk, HR data, finance data, project plans, supply chain management. Is that part of the algorithmics and the Cybersyn equivalent of today? That's one question. And the second was, and I don't mean it to be a facetious one, but the use of AI in real time in meetings that Matt described there, I can see is immensely valuable. And some people were saying, could you put meeting minutes into that to generate a richer answer? One issue with AI is it uses a huge amount of energy and even cooling. So I don't know if it's true, but a single ChatGPT query uses a pint of water to cool, apparently. So given our emphasis on sustainability and even regeneration that Jan was talking about this morning, how can we square that? Do we need to be judicious in the use of the quantity of data that we use? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, about the first one, I don't know, I guess that Martin would like to comment on the first one. You want or shall I? Martin.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that all these ERP and all these model systems are 1,000 times better than what existed in Stafford's time. So in that respect, of course, it's a progress in the right direction. They are still not completely what Stafford claimed, because the difference is that what we were saying before, the focus, the attention focus on essential variables for viability. And we will say with not only viability, but sustainability, and we're going to come back later. Yeah. for essential variables for viability will need to be very, very summarized, very well focused, and very precise, and very holistic. So when you talk about what is an essential variable for sustainability, you are not talking about human resources or about the energy use or about finances or financial performance individually. You are talking about issues that are like the issues that will keep the organization doing what it does properly, with quality, and without damaging the external environment and satisfying the customer. Okay? So normally Stafford talk about 7 ± 2 essential variables, and those are normally not in an ERP. In an ERP, you will have everything that need to be controlled, all the information that you need to do the, let's say, operational planning, operational management, all the system 2-3 kind of things. For system 2-3, perfect. You need that kind of software. For system 3-4, that's when we have the operations room, you need something that is more powerful, more abstract, more generic, and that can help the management to see if we want to continue existing, what are the less things that we need to be completely and knowing about, and that if any one of these fails, we could be in trouble, serious trouble. Yeah. So that's the difference. It's an abstract difference, but it's a very important difference, and that's where the operations room and will be focusing on. Yep.
If I may just add something to what you just said, Angela.
Yes, please. Yes.
I think what we're talking about here is really bringing all these concepts that also you have now been talking about, being it Gordon Pask's conversation theory, be it Stafford Beer's VSM, be it any other kinds of managerial or cybernetics in general. Bringing these concepts together, I think, is the prerequisite for making meaningful use of technology, of AI especially, because it helps us to give it a frame where it can really make a sense and leading to the right decisions and communication structures in the end. So you're absolutely right if you're citing from very different sides and models and system dynamics and everything. I think our job is to bring these things together with the new technologies, because what I see out there is a lot of people talk about the technologies, but they don't have these cybernetic, I don't like the name framework, but let's call it framework. And then to find an application case, an organization that is willing to invest and to make a first pilot, a first showcase of what we really can achieve when we combine IT, ERP systems, whatever, AI together with these concepts. I think there will be a huge step if we are successful in doing that.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Yes, Margaret. Sorry, Joe first and then Margaret.
You're welcome. You're first. I'm not sure. Oh, is that working now? Right. I'm not exactly sure where to start. I was absolutely delighted to watch what was being presented, because I've been assuming that somebody would do that work, bring it all together, but I didn't know who or when. And I tried to make that point a couple of years ago when I attempted and failed to present something that I was doing, which was approaching things from the other direction. Being a very low-level person, with very down-to-earth focus, I've been working on an approach to using cheap commodity technology to develop atomic-level distributed systems which are recursively nested. And I just assumed, well, somebody's going to fill in all the flesh. I'm just building bits of the skeleton here. My view being that once you actually have a skeleton, people will innovate and build upon it. So I focused on what is available in technology to include things such as wirelessly networked environmental sensors, feedback control systems, and very simple means to actually curate and make decisions at any level within the system about who we're going to share it with, because trust is conditional. The technology is certainly capable, as I see it, would just be easy to implement on top of that, because everything we need is available as free open source libraries. Depends upon how people choose to configure it. And when it came to a recursive governance from a planetary down to human, it started off with the old permaculture principles of people care, earth care, fair share, blah, blah, blah. And then Ian Kendrick came up with a term, being good ancestor. And I decided that any community could actually argue from that perspective within its own confines, within its own terms, within its own conversations about whether they were conforming to that. And some way of signaling that, yes, you're still eligible to participate within this global, distributed, and largely invisible system. So at that time, I had no interest in artificial intelligence, really. And I still see it that simplistic way, because I'm always concerned about energy consumption and resource wastage. I'm more concerned about being able to gather information in as much detail as possible, including self-reference. How much energy am I using for this? How am I going to use it appropriately? I'm not really so much concerned with artificial intelligence as constraining natural stupidity. That might sound unnecessarily flippant, but really I think that's something that has to be done, and it does require tremendous access to tremendously detailed information systems, which is why I keep coming back to the idea of a Kona-Ashby compliant economy, which we have nothing like at the moment. We don't have that ability to model at that level of feedback. But I find it easy to conceive. So I'm delighted about what's been done here. And I hope I'll be allowed to talk to this group from time to time, because I think that what I've been trying to do from the bottom up, assuming that somebody would fill in the details from the top down, I think we're approaching that now.
Thank you, John. Margaret.
I'd like to see, building on John's idea, ways in which you can actually use further intelligence gathering, external environmental sensor information feeding in, then looking at the instrument that organizations are powered by human energy and stuff like lighting, temperature, sleep, how much activity we're able to get, ergonomics, all of that stuff affects your productivity, affects your ability. We've got biopins. We tend to be better and more creative, open-ended work later in the afternoon and more focused early in the morning. So we've got these sort of biorhythms and things. And what would be very interesting to see is whether you play with, for example, temperature regulation in a building or in a factory setting, whatever, allows you to actually reduce fatigue, increase productivity, depending on what you're measuring, of course. I'd hate to do, but I think a cybernetic system needs to actually plug into that stuff too. I'd also like to see how you would feed in human gathered data, like how people are feeling, their mood, their general demeanor, etc. Those are extremely important because that's human energy, it's human creativity, it's everything that you're eventually monitoring is created from that, and the interactions between people, the relationships. And that seems to be missing completely from this discussion.
Thank you, Margaret.
Just a comment on that one. You remember that when Stafford was working in Chile, he developed his Udemy meter, and he asked people to move the slider, say how you're feeling today, and that's crucially important.
Yeah, a crude one. It was a crude one. It was lots more than that.
Yeah, very much. The other thing I'd like to mention is Interface Carpets. I don't know if you know their history, but their managing director had an epiphany, and he there's a lovely YouTube of the guy saying that I just won this award, like Captain of Industry, and I've got all this accolation. And I woke up this morning realizing that I was a robber baron. I've been destroying the earth and making vast amounts of money. And he said, okay, from now on I've got two challenges. One is to not do any damage to the planet, and then to become regenerative. And he one of the ways he did it was to design a series of eco indicators, which were things like the amount of energy taken to produce a square millimetre. A complete change in, he stopped selling carpets and started selling carpeting. So that he'd go into a place to say, I will sell you carpets for the next 50 years, and it'll cost you so much a year, which meant that instead of making a lot of profit selling it, it became more economically sensible to make very long-lasting carpets because they never replace them so often. A whole range of things, and it's really fascinating. He also did some social indicators where he went, and he wasn't quite UD, but he wasn't far off. And things like how much education Face Carthage was paying for the staff members, and a whole range of stuff that was all. I mean, it's one of the things when Angela and I write in the book. First thing we came down to was, okay, first of all, you try and work out what's important to you, which is not just making a lot of money, but you work out what's important, and then you design the indicators to reflect that, and you build that into the day-to-day decision-making circuitry, rather than just saying, oh yeah, we'll do an eco audit once a year, completely forget about it too, which is kind of what happens at the moment. So there's quite a lot of work that has been done with indicators which are not purely financial. I think it's one of the key changes that needs to be made in most organisations, that you have these indicators where you work out what really matters to the organisation, which isn't just making money.
And then how does the evolutionary aspect come in? Because new indicators will emerge as you do stuff. So as the organism grows, develops, etc., expands, reproduces, etc., you've got new indicators.
Sure.
So
again, in a bottom up.
Yeah, but that's I'm actually hearing a lot of top down stuff, and I'm not understanding how you actually capture the real time generation of stuff such that an indicator emerges and then gets monitored for a period of time.
Okay,
and then might collapse because it disappears because that systems move beyond that indicator.
And an example of this, when I was using this stuff in cooperatives, we came with this idea of indicators people love. And suddenly in one meeting people say, okay, I want to introduce a burnout index. And we said, we're all feeling knackered. And so at the end of every meeting, everybody went around and said, how knackered are you? Well, I'm 7 out of 10, or I'm 3 out of 10. And this was the first thing you looked at in a minute. You got these things that would be of interest to everybody. It closed the loop, and then it became part of the decision-making process. So
that's the same with the gin index.
They link to the gin.
We have a.
Yeah, sorry, John, you got. Did I get some questions? Right. Do you want to ask a question as well?
Just briefly, I'd like to switch from AI to IA. You said dumbfounding for people. IA is an intelligence amplifier. You ever heard of Ross Atkin? So I think the concept is like with power tools. You assist the human to do what he was going to do, or her, anyway. But you don't get in the way, say, well, step aside, human, I've got the replacement system here. And that's maybe a jaundiced view of AI.
And this
is the final question we have.
There was a reply. I was waiting to reply to the questions that were done 15 minutes ago. So I don't know if we can remember them. One was you said that you abandoned something that you created the 206 because it did not provide what you intended. That is to get shared mental models because you witnessed that this is impossible, which is, I agree 100%. The mental model is the model that we have created through all our life, and this is personal and intransferable. So there is no solution because each one has its own mental model. But the goal is not ambitious. the aim. It's just to have, let's say, a little mental model related to the issue that we are discussing. Then it's more accessible. For example, in the image that I put before about it's wrong. About the floods problem, the housing problem. This map contains different interpretations, let's say mental models, individual mental models. For me, the area of interest is that, for me, the area of interest is that, for me, the area of interest is that, because my mental model about this is that. But to have a tool that all of us see, I can see your portion of your interpretation of what we have there. And you may see my interpretation and the other and the other. So this may help to get some kind of accommodation. If the final goal is clear, that I think that was mentioned, somebody mentioned that was impossible, that the important was not the final goal, that was it means I understand very well that. But in this case, we assume that we have a common goal, that is, we wish that everybody can have a flat for living. Do we agree with that? Yes, all of us agree that every human being should have the right to have a house to live. Okay, then we have a clear goal. So let's see how to reach that goal. And we have different ways, different rules, different actions, etc. This debate is the one that is complicated because each one has their interest. But we have a tool there in front of us that we fight with that. We want, all of us want to reach that final point. We agree on that. So let's see. Let's try yours. Let's try mine. Yours. And we debate, and we may get an approximation and a kind of accommodation, not the consensus, accommodation. We can live together. Let's do part of this, part of this, part of this, and that would be quite satisfactory as at least some kind of progress. The other conclusion of what you said is that you are more pessimist than myself. You see that I don't know way of sharing anything. So I said that was a disaster. The whole thing was a disaster. Dynamic complexity, tutorial complexity, communication complexity. Do you have something that is not a disaster? No, in the case of the human being, I have my doubts if we can find something. But yes, we at least try to get some approximation to this kind of let's live together without fighting among us. And the other aspect was related, if I understand well, to the change in the technology in the 60s. Yeah, and today. Well, the technology is something accessible. The VSM is not a set of technologies of specific functions. No, it's an information system that tells you what kind of information you need for the different functions that are identified that any viable system or organism has to have. With which technology? I don't care. In the 60s it was that, now it's, I don't know what, tomorrow is artificial intelligence, in 100 years will be, I don't know what. Let's imagine that our human body changes and we are robots, or we have only the brain. All the organisms will be different, but the functions will keep, we think that they will be still. So if we move from the physical instantiation and we remain the information system, then we get rid of all these limitations.
Thank you, Jose. I'm sorry, I know that there are many people with more questions, but I think that we need to take the burnout index now. And